Hello again, everyone, and welcome once again to the Adventure Travel Club television show. We are today in Athens, Greece, and as you can see behind us, it's the Acropolis, right, Betty?
That's the one. Yes, of course it is. What else would it be when you see it sitting up on a hill like that and we're in Greece?
I don't know. You know, I've seen so many pictures of it, and now we're going to see it live, I mean with us. It just is going to be a great adventure, and we hope that you'll be with us today. Betty, I had no idea that the Acropolis was so big. Of course, you see a lot of Acropolises on a lot of hilltops throughout all of Greece, but boy, this one was just something else. Now, that stadium down there, the Olympic Stadium, you ran around that once before,
No.
It
was not that one. It was in Olympia in Greece that they have the real honest to goodness place that they did the racing, the running.
But I thought you ran around that.
No,
one.
well, that's all right. If you think so, I'll tell you I did it.
Okay.
But it was really not right there in Athens.
I mean, that was downtown Athens, and you could have,
Well, I know. I did run with the bulls in Pamplona. Not with the bulls, but I ran where the bulls ran in Pamplona.
On the street where they ran.
Yeah, well, I think that's what you have to do if you're going to go to these places. You get in the spirit of it and you participate, and that makes it all the more exciting.
It does. And I talk about exciting. This is one exciting place. I know if our viewers, probably like myself, have looked at National Geographic or other magazines, other books, and have seen the Parthenon sitting up there on top of the Acropolis. Oh man, that's one place I really would like to go and see.
They've done so much to it. When I was there several years ago, but each time that you go back, and for the people that are frequent visitors, they're doing more restoration, more.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they are, and so we're going to find out a lot about the Acropolis today as we listen to our guide, and she's absolutely wonderful.
The Acropolis itself, as I told you, was the ancient citadel. And of course, the largest sanctuary in the city of Athens. So this means that this is a rather small part of the city. Okay, it was not the whole city. Actually, the city of Athens itself would lie on the foot of the Acropolis, always, since ancient times. And we have, for this reason, quite a few buildings that we have at the foot of the Acropolis, surviving from ancient times. As we're going up, the view is improving, of course, and of course we see quite a few things. First of all, right here behind me, we have the Odeon of Herod Atticus. It is a construction that is very similar to a theater, I know. But it is not a theater, we call it Odeon. What is the difference? The Odeons were for musical performances. Odeon, it is a word still used. And Odi in ancient Greek meant a song. So this was for musical performances. And the Odeon was built in the 2nd century after Christ by Herod Atticus. The other big difference between an Odeon and a theater is the fact that the Odeons had a roof. They were covered buildings. So this one had a roof made of cedar wood. Quite expensive, as you realize. And again, Herod Atticus was a very wealthy person. I mean, he's the one who built the stadium in ancient times also, the one we saw before. And he built also this one in memory of his beloved wife, who had just passed away in 160 AD. This is happening, and you should know, however, that back then he was accused of having paid someone off to beat his wife to death. That's how she died. But of course he refused all the accusations, and on top of everything he built this Odeon for her in her memory, since he loved her so much. Now, it is a typical Roman construction. You see, of course, the seats are restored. 5,000 people can sit in here. And we have the ruins of the original stage, which had 4 levels, as you can see. Of course, there would be marble revetment on this whole stage, marble cover, and of course there would be Roman statues standing in all those small arches. And don't forget the cedar roof, okay, the closed building. We still use it nowadays for the Athens Summer Festival, which is a very important cultural event for our city. We have artists invited from all over the world. It's a dream come true for them. and we have had a big variety. Just I will mention a few names to give you the idea. Of course, starting from opera singers, our Greek diva Maria Callas, Pavarotti, Montserrat de Cavallejo, Carreras, Plácido Domingo, they have all performed here. We have had modern artists too, I mean starting from, let's say, one big name, Diana Ross, okay? This year we also had Elton John, various people. And we also have dance, modern or classical, ballet. Of course, Rudolf Nureyev has performed here.
Well, Betty, you have performed in a lot of these theaters. I saw you in some of those Roman theaters and other places. Did you perform in this one too?
Oh, unfortunately, they didn't sign my contract, so I wasn't able to. I was terribly disappointed, and I'm sure that people were too.
Now, that ancient temple is in the area of the Agora, the Athenian marketplace. And the Agora is very famous. It was really the heart of the ancient city of Athens, the public area where you had everything. You had temples and altars, of course. You had shops and workshops, of course. Shops not just in tents, but also in big porticos that would have rooms at the back, exactly used as shops, and you would have the corridor in front of them, people walking up and down and taking a look at the merchandise. Very much like shopping centers these buildings would be. Like the malls, the shopping malls you have at home. And of course, down there we would also have the law courts of Athens. The ancient Athenians were very notorious for litigating all the time in the law courts. It is also the favorite place, it was the favorite place of Socrates. Socrates, that famous philosopher, he walked up and down that area. He hardly ever left it. And Plato was one of his students. I mean, all the great people would be really down there. That's a place where also Socrates died. He was sentenced to death to drink the hemlock in the state prisons of the city of Athens. The state prisons were down there also. So it was, as you realize, the busiest place of the city. That was crowded. Exactly, agoraphobia, you have the word, the fear of the crowd, okay? That's the place where everybody would go. And of course, besides the agora, we also have another very important place here. If you look straight ahead, down there, you will see a plateau. On that hill there is a plateau, an empty area. This is usually where the sound and light show takes place nowadays. Of course, at this time of the year they have stopped this show, but that hill, the Pnyx as it is called, was used for a much more important activity in ancient times. This is where the assembly of the people of the city of Athens would hold its meetings in the democratic years of Athens. The assembly of the people was the governing body of that very famous Athenian democracy. Democracy was born in Athens for the first time in history, in 508 before Christ. And exactly, democracy meant that the people rule. And it was those people that ruled that would gather there at least 4 times a month at dawn and discuss about everything, on war and peace and even the minor details, vote the laws they wanted that were proposed by the parliament, the Senate House, and so on and so forth. It is the place where exactly they even decided about the building of the Acropolis, about all those magnificent structures that you have behind us. It is one thing to notice here is that, of course, in that very famous Athenian democracy that was considered to be the best that has ever existed, is considered to be the best that has ever existed, no women were allowed to participate. It was only for free men. Okay, it means no women, of course, and women had no position in public life, obviously, and of course no slaves. And the slaves would be always the majority in every Greek city back then. They would be the tools, the machinery. In order to build something like the things you see, you need what? You need obviously, and with the speed they built all this, I mean it's quite incredible, you need the will of the people, no doubt, and I told you democracy is already here when they are creating all this back in the 5th century BC and prospering. And you also need funds, money. You can't do anything without money. The Athenians, of course, with the fleet trade a great deal in the whole Mediterranean. The Athenian drachma back then was literally like the American dollar is nowadays. It was a hard currency that everybody wanted. And Of course, with the trade, they bring more wealth to their city. And we also have silver mines in this area. That was another source of wealth. And finally, of course, it is also the period that Athens attracts the attention of the whole world. Why? Because they are giving birth to a new kind of art that was called classical. They set the pace also in art for the rest of the world. It is this place where that kind of art was created. We have the time, of course, of the great philosophers that live in this area. They were walking down in the agora, as I said, and of course there would be many people coming to meet with them. This is exactly the period that we call golden century, the golden age of Athens. Back in the 5th century, right after those Persian wars, Athens reached its zenith. It was its heytime. And of course, such a great city could not stay without great monuments for its people. Remember, the Persians raided. Now it's time to build again. We have the money, we have the people, we will do it. And it was in 450 before Christ that a great Athenian politician, a democrat, Pericles, yes, will propose the building program of the Acropolis on that hill, on the peaks, and the people will vote for this. And it was exactly right after 450 that this thing emerged. And even though it was 40 years, we again had interruptions during the work, so it was not straight 40 years. We had interruptions, why? Because they had another war taking place, unfortunately, and this time between two Greek cities, Athens and Sparta, the two eternal rivals. Rivals about what? About domination in Greece, it was. And they fought for 27 long years, the Peloponnesian War, and it was a devastating period, as you understand, and Athens came out of it defeated. And this was the end.
Well, Betty, there were a lot of people there that day because the cruise ships had landed and all of these tourists happened to be there. So it's we've got a lot of background noise, which I apologize for, but we couldn't do anything about that.
No, we added some to it too, with our little chatter too.
Yeah, but not as much.
Not as much.
Oh, man,
but think what it would have been like if we'd have been in high season.
Oh, I don't want to think about it. Anyway, the great thing about our particular tour was wonderful because we weren't on such a tight schedule like these other folks were. So we were able to spend a lot of time here and actually sit down and kind of visualize this, and we were able to take a lot of pictures. And I really appreciated that. I thought it was really quite wonderful.
Passed from the profane to the sacred, you entered into another world, and you were getting psychologically and spiritually prepared. The access also would not be like those steps you see. This is not the original access. We know that in ancient times you would have a ramp that started from those portals and went all the way down to the foot of the hill. A very wide ramp, about 60 feet wide, we know. And it would be used not just by individual pilgrims, but also during big festivals for the birthday of Athena. The Panathenaic procession would happen then, and the whole city would march up here with hundreds of animals that would be sacrificed up there on the hill, and all this meat would be distributed among the people. It was like a big national parade, you could say, where the whole city showed its wealth.
There must have been something with those big processions in those days. I bet that was colorful.
I imagine just like it is today, truly, because in so many of the places that you go, especially like on Palm Sunday and stuff, they
process. We've kept traditions going, huh?
Yeah. Ours is for a little different purpose. We don't go for the gods, we go for the God, which makes a difference. Anyway, this is the whole history here, I think, is so interesting. These little buildings, they weren't really built for worship at first. They were just built to store some of the artifacts, they called them votives. And so then when it was destroyed, which it was, isn't this a shame that it's burned and it's destroyed, and then it's rebuilt and it's destroyed. Mm-hmm. It seems like that's the history of civilization, and you wonder if it is civilization, right? But the amazing thing is, Marvin, they didn't even know they were doing it at the time. When the Persians came in and conquered, the Athenians took and all the little statues that they could get a hold of, and they hid them in the caves, and that's why we have them today. They were preserved.
The Parthenon. Starting from the word itself, Parthenos in Greek means the virgin. It was the house of the Virgin. Who is the Virgin here? Goddess Athena. In the myth, she is always a virgin. And that's why in the statue you will never see her naked. She's always dressed and armed, of course, protecting people and herself. And she was, as I said, the protectress of the city. Now, that mythical dispute between Athena and Poseidon, I talked about it at some point when we were in Pella. I told you that they had a fight over this city. Poseidon and Athena came here and they decided to let the people choose, and they presented gifts. It was Poseidon, the sea god, who offered water to the city. He stroked his trident and water sprang out of the rock, and Athena was the one who planted the very first olive tree, and that's the gift they chose, and that's why this city became hers, and of course she named it after her, the city of Athens. And they built this temple. It was the first one that they started building up here, constructing up here, and the largest one starting in 447 BC. 447 BC, it's the time that they started building it. Now it's an amazing building. There were two architects involved, Igtinos and Kallikratis, and they are doing really something exceptional here. They, of course, implement in the best way all the accumulated knowledge regarding these buildings, these type of temples from the past, in the utmost perfection. But they also, try exactly to show, to give, to send a message, to show the spirit of their time in many ways. And I will explain myself right now. It's the details that play a very important role. And here we have something about which the Parthenon is very famous. We have curves and convexes up on this temple. We know that the Parthenon doesn't have actually a single straight line on it. Everything on it is curved and convex, and that's quite interesting. Starting from the steps, we know that the steps have a curve of this type. Okay, they are curved like this. These are things that you don't really see. Okay, this curve also exists in the horizontal lines of the roof. It's up there. We know that the walls and the colonnades of the temple, you expect them, of course, to be vertical. They are not. They are all inclined towards the center of the temple, like this. And we also know, another curve that exists for sure is on the columns themselves. The columns, as you see, get narrower towards the top, and we have those straight lines, the flutes, that create this impression of getting narrower. Now, those straight lines are not again straight. We know that the columns swell somewhere at 4/5 of their height, and it's something that you don't really see again. Now, why are all those curves and many more up there? They are there because the ancient people know about our optical illusions that we have. They know about the fact that when we see a straight line, we think it's curved. So they reverse the situation. They create curved lines so that we perceive them straight. And they used to call exactly all those corrections optical refinements for the optical illusions that we had. There is much more. We know that, for example, no distance between two columns is the same. They all differ to avoid the monotony of repetition. And we know also, again, that the four corner columns are thicker than the others. Why are they thicker? Because by being at the corner, they accept more light. So they make them thicker to look as thin as the others. They constantly play with how we perceive things, and that's the important thing about the Parthenon, this fact, the fact that it is here for us to please our human eyes and to please those high aesthetic demands those people had back then. And of course, that means that this is a man-centered building. That's a great thing about Greek civilization, generally speaking, that it was man-centered. And all those temples are down to us, to our human measures. And exactly, we are talking also about the first man-centered society of ancient times in history, that classical democratic society of Athens, with all that philosophy of Socrates, and all this is reflected upon this building. Yes, a small design of how this statue would look in the temple, and this is a very small marble copy of the statue that we have nowadays in the National Archaeological Museum. Now, the original statue was about 39 feet high, an original work of Phidias, a very famous sculptor of those years, and it was in gold and ivory, as I said. It had about 130 kilos of gold on it, kilograms of gold. It was a very big quantity, and as we realized, this was also the treasury of the city, not just a cult statue. All the gold of the city was on this statue. And those people, those Athenians, very practical people, every time they needed money, would go and they would remove a plate of gold or more and use it for their purposes, and when they had the money again, they would put it back. This statue was taken to Constantinople, okay, by the Byzantine emperors, and there we lost its traces. We don't know what happened to it. Okay, obviously it was recycled in some way. Of course, that place was really holy ground. It was the most sacred part of the Acropolis. Why? Because they believed that this was the place where the two gods fought over the city. The olive tree you are looking at over there, they believed, was the one that Athena planted during that mythical dispute. Of course, that's a new one planted by the archaeologists, as you realize. And there were some marks in the temple on the natural rock, and they believe that these were the marks of Poseidon's trident, the marks he left. The stories of this kind. And of course, Erechthon is very famous for that porch that you see with the 6 maidens. Now, mind you, they are cement copies, those ladies. All the sculpture work, also on the Parthenon, is cement copies nowadays. The originals are in the museums. Now, those ladies are called caryatids. They are supportive elements for the roof, of course, much more elegant than columns, however. They are standing in that very typical Attic posture. I mean, this is a posture introduced by the Athenian sculptors with a one loose leg, very relaxed posture, very elegant and simple dress, gracious ladies. And exactly, they were very beautiful, so beautiful that they named them caryatids. And the caryatids would be the most beautiful women in Greece back then, coming from the village of Karies in the south of Greece.
Well, they certainly did have some beautiful women, if these statues are any indication. Of course, these are the originals.
Aren't they beautiful?
Yeah, the ones that we just saw outside, of course, are not. But there's so much pollution, and you can even see the damage that's already been done to some of these statues.
You see mostly ones on the faces, don't you? But,
yeah,
you know, we've never, at least I've never seen a fat Greek woman, a Greek statue. They're all so beautifully proportioned that you can't help but wonder, do you think they really were that beautiful? And yet we know that many of the most beautiful of the sculptures ever produced by man were purchased by the British Museum in 1815, and you have to go to England, into London, to see the prize, the best, the most, what? I guess the most valuable,
probably,
yes, the most valuable ones.
I would think so. Well, we'll have to do that on one of these trips anyway. But I'll tell you, this to me was a very, very exciting adventure, getting up on top of the Acropolis and seeing the Parthenon, of course, which we'd seen pictures of for so many, many years, and then to actually be right there. But again, like you said too, Betty, you know, the restoration work that is going on here
constantly.
is wonderful.
Doesn't it make you feel humble, though? We think with all of our inventions and the things that we do today, the wonderful, the bridges and things that we build. But look at, this was how many thousands of years ago?
Quite a few.
A lot of this was in 529 A.D. that we begin to, well, even probably before that. But it's a tremendous thing, the gifts that the Greeks had.
Yeah,
that they have given to us.
Right. I think it went on a couple thousand years before that.
Yes, of course
wasn't
it
it 529 that Christianity?
That's where it rang a bell with me, because that's when Christianity, and of course that's my life is when Christianity starts.
But like you had mentioned earlier too, and as our guide did too, is that, you know, that because of all the wars and the conflicts that all of the Greeks at that particular time, way back in antiquity, were worshiping the various Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. And then, of course, we'd look at the Muslims came in, and that they made that into a mosque, and then the Christians came in and they made it into a church, and now it's a museum.
Yeah. But you know the marvelous thing too, that Acropolis was not damaged during World War II because Athens had been declared an undefended city. So
great.
praise God for the things that were preserved.
Right.
Here's the fun thing.
Yeah, these are the fun things. You know, Betty, I have to say that I really enjoyed the food. The Greeks do know how to eat, and they know how to put out some wonderful food. In fact, I think this was probably the greatest food from any of the trips that I can remember. It was great. But we have a celebration also. And, of course, we try and do this if we have people that are having anniversaries or birthdays that go along with us on our trip.
Look at, isn't that funny?
Isn't that nice? As I
She
recall,
was
that
true.
tasted
Look
great.
at, look at. You can tell that, can't you? Yeah.
We're not going to tell how old Jan was.
Now,
but,
Jan, these are Kingsburg people that joined us their first trip traveling with us.
this
And
was
I know
wonderful.
they enjoyed it.
We had such a
But
good time.
this was a beautiful little restaurant we went to. Usually we eat in our hotel.
This
but
is the hotel
was,
restaurant.
Is it really?
Oh,
I
yes,
thought this
yes.
was one down
No,
the
no, no.
street.
No, this was the hotel restaurant.
Oh.
In fact, we had so many great meals in this hotel.
Oh,
This was
okay.
a 5-star hotel that we stayed in. I want
Look
you
at-
to know that. That was
I can
really
s-
very, very nice. Oh yeah, this was great. We had a good celebration here this evening, and I look forward to the meals. But something else I'm going to look
Oh,
forward
you
to.
do?
Oh sure.
I would
on
never have known.
On our next adventure, we're going to go to Corinth, and these are some of the scenes that you will see. This, of course, is a man-made canal, and we'll talk more about that, of course, on our next show. But visiting ancient Corinth, of course, you've been there before, Betty, but for me, this was my first time, and this, again, was more and more and more excitement as we just kept traveling through Greece and seeing all these wonderful places, especially, as you said, the things that mean a lot to us
Yeah.
because of St. Paul and Christianity.
I was thinking, don't you think of the letters of St. Paul to the Corinthians? And when you say, oh, we're going to
Right.
Corinth, and you say, oh, yeah, that's where he wrote all those letters, you know?
That and Philippi, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
it puts you
it's
right in
something else.
touch with your readings. It's kind of
It really
thrilling.
does. Well, being in touch is one thing that we want to be with you. So, Betty, why don't you give everybody your phone number so that they can get in touch with you and find out about our upcoming trips?
Well, be happy to. My phone number is 559-488-7443.
So do give Betty a call, and she has some brochures on some of the trips that we do have coming up. And, it's just about time for us to say goodbye, so we'll see you next week as we go to Corinth. See you next week. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.